For decades, the United States and Venezuela enjoyed a close partnership built on oil and mutual interests. In the 70s and 80s, Venezuela was South America's wealthiest democracy, powered by the world's largest proven oil reserves. American oil giants operated freely, and Venezuelan elites embraced American culture, business, and education. Venezuela's reliability during global oil shocks cemented its role as a cornerstone of U.S. energy security. But beneath the surface, the nation's prosperity depended almost entirely on oil, a single volatile commodity. As oil prices rose and fell, so did Venezuela's fortunes, deepening inequality and leaving the economy dangerously undiversified. This over-reliance set the stage for a dramatic reversal of fortune. Venezuela's oil wealth was a double-edged sword, fueling both prosperity and fragility. For decades, the country's fortunes rose and fell with the price of crude, making the economy dangerously dependent on a single resource. The economy boomed when oil prices soared, but crashed when they fell, creating cycles of instability. Ordinary Venezuelans experienced dizzying highs and devastating lows, as the nation's wealth evaporated almost overnight. By the late 1990s, a global oil price collapse triggered a national crisis. Inflation soared, unemployment spiked, and public services crumbled. Supermarket shelves emptied, and daily life became a struggle for millions. The elite weathered the storm in their gated communities, but most Venezuelans lost jobs, savings, and hope. Families were forced to make impossible choices, and poverty spread rapidly across the country. Anger at the corrupt political class boiled over, breaking the social contract. Trust in government collapsed, and frustration spilled into the streets. Traditional parties offered no solutions, and the public demanded radical change. Protests grew larger, and the call for new leadership became impossible to ignore. The nation yearned for a leader who would reclaim oil wealth for the people, promising dignity and justice for all. Into this turmoil stepped a charismatic former army officer, ready to seize the moment and channel the people's anger into a new political movement. The stage was set for a political earthquake that would shake Venezuela to its core. Venezuela was about to be transformed, and nothing would ever be the same again. Hugo Chavez, a former paratrooper and failed coup leader, became a folk hero for Venezuela's poor. His bold defiance of the political elite and passionate speeches resonated with millions who felt left behind by decades of inequality and corruption. Chavez's image as a man of the people, unafraid to challenge the status quo, made him a symbol of hope for those desperate for change. In 1998, he channeled public anger into a movement promising a Bolivarian revolution, an end to corruption, and a redistribution of oil wealth. His campaign electrified the nation, drawing huge crowds and igniting a sense of possibility. For many, Chavez represented a break from the past and a chance to reclaim Venezuela's vast resources for its people. Chavez's fiery rhetoric and charisma won him a landslide victory, signaling a clear mandate for radical change. The celebrations that followed were filled with hope and anticipation, as supporters believed a new era was dawning for Venezuela. His early focus was domestic, using oil revenue to fund schools, hospitals, and social programs for the poor. These ambitious initiatives aimed to lift millions out of poverty and improve access to education and healthcare, transforming daily life for many Venezuelans. Relations with the U.S. cooled but remained civil at first. Both sides maintained a cautious dialogue, aware of the stakes involved in their economic and political ties. Washington, wary of Chavez's socialist leanings and ties to Cuba, watched with suspicion. U.S. officials monitored his policies closely, concerned about the growing influence of leftist governments in the region. Chavez rewrote the Constitution and launched popular social missions, cementing support among the masses. These reforms gave many Venezuelans a sense of empowerment and a voice in shaping their country's future. His policies divided Venezuelan society, but his foreign policy had not yet turned confrontational. The country was entering a period of both hope and uncertainty as old divisions deepened. A path of diplomacy with the U.S. was still possible. There remained a fragile window for cooperation and mutual understanding. But that path would soon be abandoned as tensions began to rise and trust eroded on both sides. The seeds of conflict were sown, setting Venezuela and the United States on a collision course that would reshape the region's future. In April 2002, a U.S.-backed coup briefly ousted Chavez, marking a turning point in U.S.-Venezuela relations. The Bush administration quickly recognized the new regime, but massive protests and loyalist military units restored Chavez within 47 hours. Chavez returned emboldened, convinced the U.S. was a hostile enemy bent on his removal. Any hope for pragmatic relations was destroyed. Chavez's foreign policy shifted. He sought new allies to counter U.S. influence. For the U.S., the failed coup was a diplomatic disaster, exposing its interventionist hand. Instead of isolating Chavez, the coup strengthened him and fueled his anti-imperialist narrative. The two nations were now on a collision course. The era of partnership was over. After the failed coup, the U.S. doubled down on sanctions, targeting Venezuelan officials and assets. Instead of weakening Chavez, sanctions gave him a scapegoat for economic woes and fueled anti-American rhetoric. Chavez retaliated by nationalizing foreign oil assets and forging alliances with U.S. adversaries like Cuba, Iran, and Russia. The tit-for-tat escalated, eliminating any space for dialogue. Chavez used oil wealth to build regional alliances and erode U.S. influence. Sanctions failed to dislodge him, instead strengthening his grip on power. Feeling cornered, Venezuela turned away from the West. China, hungry for resources and unconcerned with human rights, was ready to step in. A new era of foreign influence was about to begin. Chavez's death in 2013 left Nicolas Maduro in charge, without Chavez's charisma or skill. The transition was rocky, and many Venezuelans were uncertain about the future. Maduro inherited a country already teetering on the edge, with deep-rooted problems that had been masked by years of high oil prices. Years of mismanagement and dependence on oil had hollowed out Venezuela's economy. Factories closed, infrastructure crumbled, and the nation's once thriving industries faded away, leaving millions without stable work. When oil prices crashed in 2014, government revenue evaporated, triggering a historic economic meltdown. The government had no backup plan, and the country's finances spiraled out of control. Hyperinflation soared, GDP collapsed, and basic goods vanished from shelves. Everyday life became a struggle, as families waited in long lines for food and medicine that rarely arrived. Hospitals ran out of supplies, malnutrition spread, and crime skyrocketed. The health system was overwhelmed, and public safety deteriorated rapidly. Over 7 million Venezuelans fled, creating a massive refugee crisis across Latin America. Families were torn apart, and neighboring countries struggled to cope with the influx. The Trump administration responded with even harsher sanctions, targeting Venezuela's oil industry. These sanctions further isolated the country from global markets. These measures crippled the economy further, but failed to oust Maduro. Unemployment soared, and informal work became the only option for many. The suffering of ordinary Venezuelans deepened. Hunger, poverty, and despair became daily realities for millions. The nation's social fabric unraveled, protests erupted, and trust in institutions collapsed. Venezuela became a cautionary tale of resource dependence and political miscalculation, a stark warning to the world. The search for new lifelines grew desperate as hope faded and survival became the only goal for many Venezuelans. Isolated by the West, Venezuela turned to China for survival. China extended over $50 billion in loans, repaid with oil, a lifeline that soon became a leash. The loans allowed Venezuela to bypass Western banks and keep social programs afloat. China secured discounted oil and a strategic foothold in Latin America. After the 2014 oil crash, Venezuela's production plummeted, and debt to China ballooned. Most of Venezuela's dwindling oil exports now went straight to China, leaving little for hard currency. The nation's economic sovereignty eroded as dependency deepened. Analysts began calling Venezuela a debt colony. The partnership had become a burden. China's influence was now undeniable. China's role in Venezuela expanded far beyond oil. Chinese firms filled the void left by the West, dominating key sectors in infrastructure projects, often using Chinese labor and materials. Tech giants like Huawei and ZTE modernized Venezuela's telecoms and installed surveillance systems, enabling digital authoritarianism. China gained access to Venezuela's mineral wealth, extracting gold and rare earths with little benefit to locals. Environmental devastation and social unrest followed. In return, Venezuela became a loyal supporter of China on the world stage. Economic dependency translated into political allegiance. Venezuela, once a regional leader, became a client state. The price of survival was sovereignty. Venezuela's story echoes China's own century of humiliation, when foreign powers imposed their will through economic coercion. The U.S., by choosing sanctions and intervention over partnership, created deep resentment and a powerful anti-imperialist narrative. China, once a victim of such tactics, now uses debt and investment as tools of influence. America's strategy pushed Venezuela into China's arms, transforming it into a strategic outpost for Beijing in the Western Hemisphere. The suffering of the Venezuelan people was prolonged, and the region's balance of power shifted. The lesson: isolating adversaries can have disastrous, unintended consequences. In a multipolar world, punishment often backfires. Venezuela's fate is a warning for future U.S. foreign policy.